I'd like to introduce Caitlin Abbott, who is a senior planner in our office. She has been with the county almost 5 years, and she recently moved over from development review to the planning side, and she will be heavily involved in our active transportation program.
Nice to meet you. Any other introductions?
Hi, good morning. Happy New Year. I'd like to introduce everybody to Benjamin Jones. He is our new Transportation Planner 1 for the City of Norfolk's Department of Transportation. He'll be helping us with our multimodal master transportation plan and a number of our grants that we're going for going forward. So, Benjamin Jones.
Good morning. Nice to meet you. Any others? Okay, item 3 is approval of the agenda, and this is an action item. So if everyone's had a chance to review it, we'll consider a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is the public comment period. This is an opportunity for any public that's attending the meeting today to comment, and we request that individuals speaking limit their comments to 3 minutes per individual. Was there anyone here that would like to speak? Seeing none, moving to item 5 is submitted public comments, and in the package you can see that there were no submitted public comments this month. Item 6 is comments and updates from our state and federal agencies and military liaisons. We'll go ahead and start with VDOT.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I do have a few updates for the group this morning. First, a couple training opportunities coming up here in January and February. First, we have on January 16th from 1 to 3 at VDOT's Suffolk Hampton Roads District Office. We have a ADA update and lessons learned, the American with Disabilities Act accommodations. We have a training session on that for any localities that are interested. Also, we have, as part of our Urban Quarterly Forum, on February 21st, beginning at 9 o'clock at our Hampton Roads District Office in Suffolk, we have an environmental training for locally administered projects. So those 2 training opportunities, hopefully you've seen information on that. If not, please reach out to me or my team and we'll make sure you have that information to sign up. Another topic that I wanted to talk about is our Urban Highway Financial Survey. For those cities and towns here in Hampton Roads that receive urban maintenance payments from VDOT, you should have seen an email come out from VDOT last month regarding the urban expenditure reporting method for these maintenance payments that you receive. Historically, in previous years, this reporting was facilitated through the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service at a UVA. This year, we actually are doing the reporting ourselves this year. So you're going to be receiving an email from VDOT with a form for you to fill out to fill out your expenditures for how you spent those maintenance payments in lieu of doing the Weldon Cooper survey. So again, more information on that should be coming out. Hopefully you've seen something already. If not, I'll make sure Sonia and her team gets that information to you. And again, you'll receive an individual email per locality with the form that needs to be filled out in lieu of the Weldon Cooper survey. And that's for any city in town that receives urban maintenance payment from VDOT. And finally, I did want to provide a quick update. I know this is part of agenda item number 15 for your information. A quick update on the Smart Scale policy review update. I know we had Brooke Jackson from our Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment that came out in October and presented to this group. Since that time, there's been a lot of action from our Commonwealth Transportation Board. The CTB actually met on December 4th and passed several policy changes to the Smart Scale program that we will be implementing now for the Round 6 program. A couple of those items you've seen pretty much as presented by Brooke. Some of the staff recommendations were approved. A couple things just to mention, a new calculation congestion factor looking out 7 years in lieu of 10. I think what we had recommended was 10, what was approved was 7 years. So that's going to be included for Round 6. A requirement to utilize a forward-looking economic development measure, that's also been included. The refined definition of high priority projects and the elimination of the second step for scoring high priority projects. That was approved. Also, the changes recommended to create a 3-tier application limit. That did not pass. So the limits that we had previously are still in place. So there were no changes to that for round 6. In addition, the board recommended removing the land use factor as a multiplier. You remember that was part of the normal scoring. It was then recommended to be a multiplier. The land use factor has now been totally removed from the equation. And then finally, the typology changes for the actual scoring were in typology A. There were some changes to that, and typology A is for Hampton Roads and for Nova. Basically for safety, the safety factor, the scoring went from 5% to 15%. Congestion stays the same at 45%. Accessibility went from 15% to 25%. Economic development stays at 5%, and environmental stays at 10%. Right now, VDOT's working with OIP and with DRPT on revising the Smart Scale Technical Guide. So that's currently being done. That'll go out for public comment probably at the end of the month. So we definitely will make sure that gets out to this group. We would like for your input. In addition, I know Eric's team's been going around meeting with each locality to talk about round 6 Smart Scale and looking at projects that would be eligible moving forward. Also, the resolution that has all this more detailed information is actually in the packet under agenda item number 15. So anyway, just wanted to make sure everybody saw that was finally approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board in December. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and my team.
And I would assume that this information would also be in the presentation available online at the CTB meeting?
Absolutely, yes. The Commonwealth Transportation Board, all their meetings are recorded. So not only is the agenda and PowerPoint available, but the recording is actually out there too. And I would encourage you all to listen to the recording to kind of hear some of the dialogue between the CTB members and some of the questions that they had asked and how those were answered. That is available on the Commonwealth Transportation Board's website.
So that's a lot. I'm sure we'll follow up on that later. We'll go ahead to DRPT. Not here today. Report?
Good morning. Happy New Year. No report other than to just extend the New Year once again offer to if any of our communities in Hampton Roads region are interested in a tour of the port. Please reach out to us, and our team would be happy to host you to show what an impact your communities have in helping us achieve our growth. So thank you.
And the Navy. Okay, so I think that's all of our agencies and liaisons. Item number 7 is election of officers, and I will hand this to our election committee chairman, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much. It is certainly one of the privileges to serve on this committee to help find leadership for the next 2 years. And I want to begin by thanking Ms. Oliver for having served the last 2 years. Let's give her a round of applause. With that, the committee this year was Troy Eisenberger, Angela Rico, David Jarman, Tom Lindinger, and Todd Hallisey. And we've been working to put together a slate of officers. As is our tradition, Ms. Carol Rizzio is being nominated and has agreed to serve as the upcoming chair from Gloucester County. And our proposed member for the vice chair position is coming from the city of Chesapeake, Mr. Troy Eisenberger. With that, from this committee, that is our recommendation.
We have a recommendation. We have a recommendation. Is there any additional discussion on the recommendation? Or we'll consider a motion?
Motion to approve the slate as presented.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Jamie's out of here. All right, well, hopefully I'll do some good over the next 2 years. Yeah. All right, so item number 8 is approval of the consent agenda. Hope everybody has had a chance to review that. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move the approval.
Is there any, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 9 is the state of transportation in Hampton Roads final report. And I'll turn it over to the
Good morning. The State of Transportation report is a report that we do often. And in November, Keith had updated this group on what was included in the report. The report was put out for public comment starting November 1. It was there for a month through December 1, and comments that were received have been incorporated in the final report. So today's motion is we're asking for TTAC recommendation for TPO board approval. And any questions, Keith can answer them.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, have a motion?
Motion.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 10, regional performance measures and targets, and I believe Keith has a presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Today I'll be making my annual presentation on the regional performance measures and targets. As a reminder, federal legislation requires that states and MPOs prepare and use a federally established set of performance measures, and we must also set targets and monitor the progress for each of these areas. So we at HRTPO work in cooperation with you, the TTAC, to help produce these targets. And a few years ago, the TTAC formed a regional performance measures working group to help with this. The group met in mid-December to go over the targets that you'll see that they recommended for approval today. So this is a list of all the targets, the areas that we need to set targets for. They're in the areas safety and transit in terms of an annual basis. And then we also need to set 4-year targets in the areas of pavement condition, bridge condition, roadway performance, and freight. So today, we only are going to be looking at the annual targets. So we'll be talking about the safety targets you see there, as well as the transit targets. Before I start with the safety targets, I just want to remind everybody, when we do set our targets, we have a couple different things we can do. We can either adopt the statewide targets that are established by VDOT, but report them specific for our area. We can also choose to select unique MPO-specific targets for our area, or we can choose to use a combination. For example, maybe for roadway safety, we choose a statewide target for fatalities and a unique one for injuries or something like that. The other thing I want to remind everybody is there are no penalties if we do not meet our targets. So some of the state targets, for example, if you don't meet your targets, it affects how you have to fund certain areas. In terms of MPOs, there is no penalty whatsoever. It can be addressed during our quadrennial certification review that's coming up, but otherwise, there is no impact if we do not meet our targets. So when we look at the roadway safety targets, there are 5 that we need to set as a region. That's the number of fatalities, the fatality rate, number of serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and then the bike and pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, the number of that combined. So when we look historically, we have actually set our safety targets largely based on the Vision Zero concept. And so what that means in terms of our targets is we want to reduce the current number of fatalities or serious injuries, bike pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, by a set amount each year, so that by the time we get to the horizon of the LRTP, which is currently 2050, we reach the number 0. So the numbers you see here are the ones that were officially approved as our 2023 safety targets in each of these areas. Once again, those were all set based on this Vision Zero concept. When we look at the state targets, starting in the year 2020, they started using a model to come up with a statewide number of fatalities, serious injuries, and so on that they thought they would expect to occur based on a number of factors. So I list a few on the right: population, gas prices, things like that. There's dozens and dozens of factors in there. What's important to know about their model is each of the last few years, it has led to a statewide target that looked at an increasing number of fatalities and serious injuries. So that was very different than what we're looking at as in terms of our region, where we're looking at getting down to zero. They were looking at what they considered a realistic number based on these factors, and it led to an increasing target in each of these areas. However, when you start looking at 2024, the IIJA requires that your safety targets as a state must be either level or improved, or a decrease in the number of fatalities and serious injuries, and provide justification. So what that means for the 2024 statewide targets is VDOT ran the model again. They also expected an increase in fatalities and serious injuries, but because of the IIJA, they had to set flat targets. So when they look at the number of fatalities, their target for 2024 is exactly the same as 2022. Same with serious injuries, same with non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So keep that in mind when I show you what the impacts would be if we went with the state targets as a region. Basically, it would be all the same, where we would be the same number as the 2022 targets. So moving on to each of the individual areas, starting with fatalities. The chart on the left shows you the number of fatalities in our region each year going back to 2008. Unfortunately, you can see over the last decade or so, we have been seeing an increase in the number of fatalities. Slight bit of good news is we did see a decrease from 2021 to 2022. The number went from, I think, about 159 it went from 169, to 151, I think it was. So you can see that there was a bit of good news. Unfortunately, the 2023 numbers aren't looking great. They'll probably be in between what we saw in 2021 and 2022. So it will still be that elevated level from what we saw, a decade and more ago. So if we use the Vision Zero concept to come up with a target for the 2024 fatality target, the number we get is 136. If we did the statewide method, it matches exactly what we saw in 2022. So that's actually 153. When we look at a fatality rate, it should be set merely by taking that fatality target that I just discussed and then comparing it to an anticipated change in the amount of vehicle miles of travel in your region. The state used a slight decrease in the amount of VMT, minus 0.3%, to come up with their targets. Based on the data we see here, there's no reason to deviate from what the state sees in terms of their numbers. So when we also look at the rate, similar to the number of fatalities, it has been increasing. But if you use the Vision Zero concept, we get that number 0.935 as a candidate target for our fatality rate target as a region. Serious injuries has been better news than we see it in terms of fatalities. There was a pretty large decrease a decade and a half ago, and then it's been largely flat since roughly 2013 or so. You get roughly 1,500 to 1,700 serious injuries in our region each year. So using the Vision Zero concept, the number you come up with for a possible target is 1,505 in our region. Serious injury rate, exact same thing as fatality rate. You just take that serious injury target and compare it to the VMT targets that you see there. Same thing, it's been largely flat, slight increases or decreases, but if we did use the Vision Zero target, we get 10.38 serious injuries per, I believe it's 100 million vehicle miles traveled. Looking finally at bike and pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, that news is definitely not good. It has been increasing every year since the year 2018. So we had a little over 200 bicyclists and pedestrians that were either killed or seriously injured in crashes in our region in the year 2022. So using the Vision Zero target, you come up with a number of 177 for our region. So with that, when the working group met in December, they all came to a consensus that we should continue to use the Vision Zero targets as a region. They felt that really it's unrealistic to expect. It's not good news to say, hey, let's maintain this really high number of fatalities and serious injuries as a region. We do need to aim as a region to get towards this zero number. So like I said, they came to a consensus that we should continue to use the Vision Zero targets. So the 5 targets you see on the left is what they recommended for us to use. So before I move to the transit targets, I thought I would just open it up if anybody had any questions about the discussions that we had in terms of safety targets or anything that I've shown you to this point. Hearing none, we'll move on to the transit targets. In terms of transit targets, there's 2 areas we need to set it for. That's transit asset management. So that's the condition, state of good repair of the transit system. And then we also need to do transit safety. So when you look at transit asset management, there's 4 categories. One is rolling stock. So that's your buses, your ferries, trolleys, things like that. Equipment and service vehicles. So those would be the non-revenue vehicles in the transit fleet. Infrastructure, which in our region generally means light rail infrastructure. And then also facilities. So that could be park and ride lots, maintenance facilities, but bus shelters, things along those lines. So each transit agency, if they're a tier 1 agency, must develop and carry out their own transit asset management plans and set their own targets. So HRT is a tier 1 agency, so they set their own targets. Smaller agencies such as WADA and Suffolk Transit are tier 2 agencies, and so they can participate in a group plan if they so choose. And WADA and Suffolk Transit so choose to take part in the DRPT statewide targets. So to come up with the numbers that you'll see on the next slide, it's just merely a weighted average of the targets that are set by HRT and then the WADA and Suffolk Transit targets based on the statewide numbers. So a little tough to see here, but the column on the right is the draft targets that you get in each of these categories based on a weighted average of HRT, WADA, and Suffolk Transit targets for the year 2024. Finally, transit safety. There's 4 categories we need to look at, and that's fatalities, injuries, safety events, and then the reliability of the system for each transit system. This is exactly the same as what I just showed you with transit asset management. Tier 1 agencies must develop their own plans. So HRT has their own public transportation agency safety plan. Tier 2 agencies can participate in group plans, and so WADA and Suffolk Transit participate in DRPT statewide safety plan. So the numbers that you'll see here are entirely based on weighted average of each of those. So these are the targets that HRT has established for the year 2024 for each of the areas. They set a target of 0 fatalities, for example, on their system, less than 76 injuries on their bus system, and so on. Same for WADA and Suffolk Transit. Once again, these are based on the statewide targets, which are those rates that you see there. In terms of like less than 0.5 injuries per 100,000 revenue miles, for example. And then the numbers are just established for WADA and Suffolk Transit based on that. And then this will be what we're asking you to approve today are the 2024 draft targets, once again, based on the weighted average of what I just showed you for transit safety for each agency. So in terms of next steps, we'll ask for approval of the safety and transit targets here from this group today, and then we'll ask for it from the HRTPO board at the January meeting. The 4-year targets I showed you on the first slide for bridge, pavement, roadway performance, and freight. They may be revisited at the midpoint, which is 2024. So if the state chooses to amend any of their 4-year targets, then we have the right as a region to reestablish ours as well. So when I come back here next year, if the state has chosen to change any of their targets, we'll have to address it at that point. One last thing, and this is kind of the biggest next step, I guess, in terms of this area. Recently, federal legislation was passed that we need to add one more performance measure, and that's in the area of greenhouse gas emissions. So don't have a lot of details to present at this point. In terms of that, we'll get a lot more guidance here in the coming months, but the state must establish their initial targets in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by February 1st, and then we'll have 180 days after that. So roughly around August 1st is when this group will need to approve our initial greenhouse gas emissions. So I'll be back in front of you sometime over the summer with a lot more information on this and proposed targets, hopefully. But just keep that in your mind, is that that's going to be coming around the corner. So with that, we have the recommended action of approving the safety and transit targets that I showed you today, and I'll show you here on the next couple slides. But with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have on this presentation.
Thanks, Keith. Have any questions? Seeing none, I have a motion to approve the recommended targets for safety and transit 1 year.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 11 is the Carbon Reduction Program Project Selection Process, and John has a presentation.
Like our old logos? Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Today, I will provide you with a briefing on the Carbon Reduction Program project selection process. This is for the fiscal year 2022 to 2029 funding. And I briefed the TTAC back in June on this item. And so some of the information that I'll present today is going to be more of a refresher and a reminder for the program as it stands right now. So the program purpose is listed here, and it's to reduce carbon essentially. Now the way this is written here, it's somewhat confusing because on one hand they're talking about emissions and don't necessarily mention carbon, and even in the guidance document that was provided by USDOT, it kind of flips back and forth. So I had a couple of meetings with Virginia DEQ on this to try to clarify. And so the bottom line is to reduce carbon. We want to reduce carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and it wasn't quite clear initially until we had some further clarification. So just a little background on the program. So by November 15th, states were required to develop a carbon reduction strategy, which VDOT has done that. They've developed a strategy, and they submitted that for review by USDOT. And the strategy has to support projects that will reduce, and even it says here emissions, and doesn't necessarily say carbon. That's why it's a little confusing when it bounces back and forth like that in the terminology. It's got to be updated every 4 years, and states and MPOs, and I underline this here, are encouraged to obligate CRP funding for projects that support that strategy. So at this point, they're not required to, which I found that kind of odd too. But at this point, we're going to try to follow the state's carbon reduction strategies as close as we can as we move forward with this process. So they are available for obligation up to 4 years. Aside from the carbon reduction for the projects that we need to look at and emissions reductions, there are 6 other categories that FHWA encourages you to utilize and consider when submitting applications for this program. Safety and complete streets, ADA compliance, equity for all community members, climate change and sustainability, labor and workforce development, and truck parking. Some additional eligibility requirements: the project has to be identified in the STIP and in the TIP, as well as in the statewide long-range plan and in our metropolitan long-range plan. I'm not going to go through all these eligible activities, but just kind of highlighting a couple here. So you see the third bullet down, the Transportation Alternatives Project. We have a program that looks at transportation alternatives already. So this is just an additional way to get some of those kind of projects funded. The second to last bullet says development of a carbon reduction strategy. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, or at least I did, that how are we going to measure the reduction of carbon emissions by doing a plan? And the answer to that is you don't. So in some projects that are going to be submitted under CRP, we have to do a qualitative analysis. So you have to describe how this would link to reducing carbon, for example. And we'll get a little deeper into that on down the road here. But so what some projects will have a qualitative scoring on it, others will have quantitative. Quantitative is going to be better. You receive a higher score for quantitative measures that you can prove and demonstrate. Some other types are listed here. The fourth bullet down, projects that improve traffic flow but do not involve construction of new capacity. So that's very important to remind yourself of. And then there are quite a few projects here that deal with some of the different port activities that are underway. So those kind of line up well with this program too. All right, so here's the numbers. It looks a little small. I'm sorry about that, but I've presented on these numbers before. But if you follow through the first two columns here for fiscal year 22 and 23, these are the funds available. Now, the HRTPO board has already approved the funding in those first two categories to the tune of a little over $8 million. So those funds aren't available for the fiscal year 24 through 29. And if you look at the total amount available right now for 24 to 29, it's that little box at the bottom in the green, is a little over $24 million is available. All right, so back in June, we developed a working group at the TPS, and the working group consisted of Robert Lewis from Suffolk. We had Dave Jarman from Virginia Beach, Ben Goodall from WADA, Sherry Dawson from HRT, and our former chair, Jamie Oliver from Alawite County. And so we got together a few times and had some email consultation back and forth over the summer and early fall to come up with some ideas to get this program running. And one of the ideas that we wanted to look at was utilizing our current CMAQ application process to determine emission reduction benefits. Now, you might be thinking, and I did, why would we use that? Because one of the things they're looking at is emissions. We want to find out if there's any carbon reduction, first of all. Then, as another tier of that, are there any benefits to any emissions that we do measure would receive some points? And then thirdly, as I mentioned before, it would be a qualitative response to, for example, the program, putting a plan together, how are we going to score that? We would do that qualitatively. Next, we are going to utilize the USDOT CMAQ toolkit because there are project types in there that we can determine the reduction in carbon. So we'll use that where we can, and/or any other documented method to determine carbon reduction benefit of project. Nextly, utilizing a new application for CRP projects. And Keith, could you pull up that application? It's in your agenda, but I just kind of wanted to go through briefly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But, oh, there it goes. There's back. All right. So the project process that we're going to hopefully get underway here this late winter, early spring, it looks like this here, and it's for fiscal year funding through 24 and 25 and 26. The first part of this is, pretty straightforward information that we're asking for. But then when you get into the eligible project type, we'll ask you to go to the link that we have in the application here to make sure that the project that you are considering is eligible for this funding. So nextly, the description of the project, pretty straightforward. And then project need. Now this is where we get into if you can have, this project is a project type that can be scored with the CMAQ toolkit. Please use that CMAQ toolkit and any of your inputs and outputs that you use to get that determination, submit that along with your project application. Secondly, if you used another toolkit or another method to determine that carbon reduction, just submit all the information that you utilize to make that determination. And thirdly, the qualitative part, if you can move to the next page, or I can do it. Oh, too many. But if you have other anticipated benefit, you would spell that out with any resources that you have. Then we get down into this next section here that I mentioned those groups, the 6 groups earlier that are to be considered but aren't necessary. In other words, you do not have to have, for example, a truck parking as part of your application. But if you do, you could receive bonus points for that. So any of these are just more bonus points, and you don't have to have one of these in order to submit a project. Next slide here. In the funding, if you move down to the table there, we're looking for 3 years of funding at a time. So it's a triennial approach. So it's for 24, 25, and 26 for this upcoming round that we anticipate. Any individual year, the max we have listed is $1 million as a max request. And for the lifetime of the project, it's going to be $3 million. No, I think that's it on that. Okay, we can pull that down, and then you can ask any questions on this once we get toward the end here. But let me finish getting through these recommendations we had. So I mentioned it's to be a triennial process in starting fiscal year 24. The lifetime cap and the annual cap, I mentioned that, and then utilizing reserve where we can. Usually it's 5%. If we don't consider having a bit of a reserve with the cost of projects going up always and consistently, it might be good to have some money left there, and that determination will be made starting with the TPS in February. And in addition to that, this is a TPO staff recommendation, is to limit the project applications to 3 per round. All right, here's the schedule. So I mentioned earlier, the Commonwealth has developed their strategy. And Todd, did you get an answer back to see if that's been approved yet or not?
Madam Chair, John, it has not been approved. It's been submitted to Federal Highway for review. We're anticipating comments back from Federal Highway in February.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. So here we are today considering recommendations to provide to the HRTPO board. And then January 18th, the board is scheduled to approve the process for CRP project selection. And the day after that, we'll open the application window for CRP and give you a month. The deadline will be February the 19th for submittals. And then either March or May, HRTPO board is scheduled to approve projects and allocations for the program. I think I've provided this to you previously, but it's information that is something you might want to utilize, the CRP guidance, some FHWA and bill resource guidance and CMEC emissions toolkit. And then there's some phone numbers here for a couple folks at USDOT. For example, if you have a project that doesn't necessarily fit in that eligibility in the guidance document, there is some leeway there where you can contact the USDOT to see if a project might fit within the parameters. So today's recommended action is to recommend HRTPO board approval of the application form and the proposed project selection process as listed on those 2 slides I showed you previously. Available for any questions if you have any. I know I threw a lot at you real quick. Your head's kind of spinning.
Thanks, John.
You're
Are there
welcome.
any questions? All right, I'll take a motion on the recommendations for the application and the process. Second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 12, 2023 CMAQ and RSTP project selection process. And Jeff has a presentation for us.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with the group to go through the process of the annual allocation of congestion mitigation, air quality, and regional surface transportation program, RSTP and CMAQ. This is a process conducted annually by the HRTPO. Projects are scored and ranked. There are established procedures that have been voted on and approved for considering these applications. As everyone probably knows, the CMAQ projects are targeted to projects that will improve air quality, and the RSTP has much greater flexibility in the selection and allocation of funding. The annual process that we go through begins with soliciting public input to potential projects, followed up by some formal submissions by the localities and agencies. Those applications then are reviewed, scored, and ranked in accordance with the established procedures, and your TPS committee then reviews that information and develops a funding recommendation. And that's what's here today to the TTAC to review the TPS application recommendation that was completed last fall and make a recommendation to the TPO board. And then once board has considered and approved allocations, that is then forwarded to VDOT for inclusion in the next update to the state 6-year improvement program. For each program, these are the marks that we used for the FY 2030 process. If these look familiar, these are the marks we've used consistently over the last several years. The 80-20 split of federal and state money, 15.3 in CMAQ and a little over 37 million in RSTP. But as most will recall, we never begin with a clean slate. That many of the projects previously approved have multi-year funding requirements. So the first step would be look at what we call the penciled-in projects. These are existing projects that have been approved that have funding needs for the target year of allocation, and that in this case it's FY30. So we see 10 million was penciled in already for the CMAQ and over 47 million for RSTP. So well over committed in RSTP with a little bit of space on the CMAQ side of the equation was the starting point. When presented this information, the TPS recommended that no new applications be considered for the FY 2023 allocation process to allocate FY30 funds. Instead, that they would work to accommodate the penciled-in needs for existing projects. And so the group met and came up with a set of recommendations allocating the 15.3 million to 10 CMAQ projects as shown in table 1 here. And then a dozen projects on the RSTP side for the full 37 million. And that is the TPS recommendation that the TTAC recommend those allocations to the HRTPO board for formal approval of the available 2030 CMAQ and RSTP allocations. And happy to take any questions at this time.
Madam Chair, I have a quick comment, not necessarily a question. Thanks, Jeff. I just wanted to make a mention. I know I said this at TPS, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it here today. As you note on both CMAQ and RSTP allocations, the money's being totally allocated to projects and nothing's being left in the reserve. And I know right now with the uncertainty of bids, it's nice to have some funding sitting in the reserve in case you need it to fully fund your projects. I know John just mentioned that on the CRP of keeping a reserve account balance. And I would just, again, I know all the money's being allocated. I just want to make note that, if costs come in high, then obviously the localities will be looked at to fully fund the projects to whatever the new estimate might be. So again, I think there's policy for CMAQ RSTP says up to 5%. And I know we're not showing anything being in the reserve right now. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out and make that comment.
You
And it seems like
forced me to jump ahead to my secret slides. Once we had approved, wanted to call this as an early preview to the group of when the TPS meets, I believe in February. One of the agenda items, these are the available reserves in both programs in the current 6-year plan, over 6 million in CMAQ and over 16 million in RSTP. So just under 23 million is available across the program in available reserves. So even showing the zero balances in 30, we have not a insignificant sum of money to allocate to projects, either on cost increases or again to jump ahead and show you a little bit. As we look to the next allocation cycle, which will be FY31, we have just a limited number of CMAQ projects with penciled in requests, just over 2 million. So looking at a healthy CMAQ allocation process, but on the RSTP side, we are still very heavily committed into the future with 31, FY 31 totals just about at target. And then if you look ahead to 32, well over target. So using those reserves either to handle cost increases on existing projects or potentially move some of this 31, 32 penciled in money forward if possible to advance projects, but then also to build down and create some space into these out years would be an option for the TPS to consider. So a lot of moving pieces with this. Sorry, I meant to go backwards. But this is the information that will be taken to TPS in February on the reserve side.
Thanks, Jeff. And it's been many months since we discussed it, but I think there was a reason for us allocating it all. And since the 5 years I've been on, this is the first time we have not kept the reserve. It was just trying to get all the money where it was needed. It's good to know that we can have money come in for future reserve.
And I don't know how well this works in readable, what have you. What we've seen with the IIJA, that the actual numbers, we hit a mark of 37 million, but actually, you're seeing 43, 48, that put more money into this program. So even though we've been holding to the 37 million mark, that's why you're seeing the growth of some of these reserves in these middle period of the IIJ bill. Obviously, that has an expiration date, won't keep continuing into the future. And if anybody has a crystal ball to predict what Congress will do next, I'm happy to look over your shoulder. But for the interim, we have some healthy balances due primarily to that funding, additional funding level that's been in effect for the past several years cycles.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, this is an action item, so I make a motion for the project allocations for fiscal year 2030. Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion for approval? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion for approval carries. Okay, item number 13 is a special studies for fiscal year 2025 for the Unified Planning Work Program. And Rob has a presentation.
Good morning. As she said, I'm going to talk about special studies for next year, which starts July 1. So you're probably familiar with our UPWP, covers planning money from the federal government, covers us, but also the transit agencies and VDOT. So it, of course, starts with July 1, updated on an annual basis, et cetera. We'll get a draft to you in the spring and look to board approval in May. So what are special studies? Well, they answer specific questions raised by you, and they require work beyond what we regularly do as far as what we're required to do under the MPO process, which is the LRTP, the TIP, the CMP, and public involvement. So we have some staff hours to do a few special studies a year. And in fact, this year, we're working on several, and I'm going to show you them in different categories. The first category is transit and rail. Some of you have seen our bus stop vicinity audit that we did for the 757 Express. And then we've published, of course, through this body, the Improving Hampton Roads Passenger Rail Service. And we're working on Hampton Roads Rail Crossing Study. Then if you look at operations, Keith's group is updating the procedures for the closures at river crossings. And we were asked by the port to look at how port trucks could meet their charging needs. And we plan to do a regional signage review. And then as far as other types of things, active transit safety and locality requested, we've got several things going. With the boat and Southampton Roads Trail, as you can see. And Virginia Beach asked us to look at the factors that cause the crash fatality increases that we've seen. And we're getting close on that. And then here's an example of one that's just locality focused, Hampton Comprehensive Transportation Study. We've done things like that for other localities. So, which brings us to all the different categories of things we've done over the years. I won't go through all of these, but you can see, economics, military, sea level rise, tolling, things that we're not working on this year, but we've worked on in previous years. And you might have a new topic area. So it's very broad. So the next steps would be to contact me or Pavithra and talk about your study needs, or send an email with an idea. And you've got a few weeks to do that. That the 19th is 2 weeks from Friday. And so then we'll see if we have the expertise and the hours to do those things, and then include the feasible ones in the UPWP. So with that, are there any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, item number 14 is a 3-month tentative schedule for this group, so you can see what's coming up. Item number 15, for your information, there is a long-range transportation plan subcommittee meeting minutes and the Hampton Roads Traffic Operations Subcommittee meeting minutes. And then item C, there is a DRPT I-64 Transit Operators and Regional Planning Survey that is available. Do we know when that survey closes?
I believe they closed, they did say they were closed, but they are still taking feedback if we have them. So they did encourage us to share this information.
So if you have feedback, I guess do it soon. And then item D is the Rebuilding America Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equality, the RAISE grant. Those grants are due February 28th. If you need a letter of support from the HRTPO board, you need to submit that by February 12th. And then item 16 is announcements, and I'll turn that to Pavithra.
Mic on. So under announcements, I don't think this is listed. The HRTO meets in 757 right after 11:30. Okay, the main thing we wanted to bring to your attention, first of all, thank you for being here and RSVPing. So we had a quorum. As you can see, we had a lot of actions that needed your approval. So just to help future meeting planning and logistics, if you go to our website and it's included in the agenda, we have a list of TTAC voting members and alternates listed by locality and agency. Our request to you is please take a look. If that list needs to be updated or if there are vacant positions, there are a few that are vacant. Make sure that you please follow up with us. It could be an email from your city manager or mayor saying we appoint this person from our locality. That helps us with two things. One is if you're not able to attend, your alternate can attend, so we have a quorum. And then two, it also helps us. Kathleen's not here today, but there's a lot of craziness that happens behind the scenes to get this table set up. So we need to know who from your locality is going to be at the table. So please follow up, check this list, let us know if there's updates, if people have moved on, retired, or if there's a change in role. We really want your help in making sure we have a quorum for future meetings. We can be as obnoxious as we want to by bugging you all the time about RSVPs. We do not want to do that. So really help us help you with this meeting. And because a lot of things, when we go to the TPO board, one of the questions we asked is, did our technical staff have a chance to give feedback on this? So we would really want to tell them TTAC has taken a look at it. So just a plug to take a look, make updates. And if you have any questions, follow up with me. Send an email from your agency head, city manager, locality. A letter doesn't need to be formal, just an email saying we appoint this person. That would be the main request that I have for all of you today.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had one additional announcement. It's not listed in the agenda. A few of you have asked me when the next TPS meeting was going to be held. And originally I had it scheduled for Friday, February 16. But since we wanted to give you a little more time to develop your CRP applications, we decided to push that another week. And I anticipate having that TPS meeting on the next Friday, which would be February 23rd. That would be at 9:30 a.m. And that would be here and most likely in the 757 room. So for those of you that I told the information, please strike that and pencil in the 23rd, but we will send the agenda out a week ahead of time. Thanks.
Tim first.
Oh, I gave it first? Okay. Madam Chair, I want to let the group know that on March 1st, I will be retiring after 35 years with York County. And so the February TTAC and TPS meetings will be my last. My colleague Beth Mertzquin will continue to represent the county on the engineering side. She couldn't be here today, unfortunately. As far as who will represent us on the planning side, that has yet to be determined, but we will, of course, let TPO staff know once that decision is made. That's all. Thank you.
Maybe I should have gone before you. But as a warming going away present, staff did receive a preliminary draft 2050 TAZ allocations. So we're reviewing them internally, and we'll be calling an LRTP subcommittee meeting probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks so that we can get locality staff, Tim, to review these draft TAZ allocations for 2050. So be on the lookout for an email for a doodle poll for that meeting.
Congratulations, Tim. I know you will be missed. All right. Ida, anything else? Item 17 is old and new business. Is there any old or new business? Okay, meeting adjourned.